Thank you very much for watching WTV News Review. Always a pleasure being your host. My name is Elijah Mwangi. Today we are shifting gears a bit from what we are used to, looking at the news that are making the headlines, to a discussion of matters of national importance. And now this is about the Kenya that we want. And come to think about it, the Kenya that we want, probably that's not the difficult question, but how to get it there and getting the practical steps. That's what really counts, and taking, of course, people to be accountable when they lead us in a different direction. To engage in that solutions-based conversation is Lone Felix. Lone Felix is an Equity Africa fellow who is going to tell us more about what he has been doing, because he has been to conferences, having initiatives, so he has a lot to tell us. Thank you very much, Felix, for finding time for us.
Thank you for having me, Elijah. I appreciate it.
The Kenya that we want, what comes to your mind?
When someone mentions the Kenya that we want, what I've always stated is a country where everybody can partake of the promise of citizenship. And that is just about opportunities, that it should not really matter where I come from, who my father is, what is the second name, but it should be that I have opportunity to advance my dreams, advance my ambitions, and realize anything that I aspire freely, with support from the society, with support from family, with support from government.
We'll be going through the details and engage more in terms of the Kenya that we want. But I want to get your comments concerning the president's speech just the other day during the Mashujaa Day celebrations on Tuesday on ICC. He said that there is no one who can tell us how not to pray. And I remember the ICC judge Zuku gave a directive that no matters about ICC should be discussed in public rallies. What's your take on that? Do you think there are dire consequences? Are we heading in the right direction?
I mean, I'll take a look at it from two perspectives. The first perspective is entirely political. I think the president has been under pressure to comment publicly on the case that is affecting his deputy. And there was growing impression that he has not come out as strongly to support his deputy. So I believe part of what he was doing was to send a message to his core support base that I am still with my man. From a purely legal perspective, I think that it's not right. It's not proper. The ICC, in as much as the matter has been politicized, and ICC is a creation of states. So in many ways, it's a political court. However, what is going on there is legal. And from my own advice, I think if you are before a court of law, you want to do, you want to approach it in a manner that does not antagonize the court. So I think the deputy president needs to focus on his legal defense.
His legal defense.
His political rhetoric,
But of course, the ICC judge, that is Zuku, said there's no way whatever that is being portrayed in the media, whatever is being said by the politicians, will affect the outcome of the case.
I mean, courts operate within contexts, and beyond the law, there are always extrajudicial considerations that go into any decision of the court. And I think that is what the political class in Kenya is trying to do, to know that the fact that Zuku has mentioned what is going on in Kenya, it actually means that he is looking at what is going on. And you cannot, if you're a human being, you will always be influenced by what you hear, by what you see. So while he is right to assert the independence of the court, I think there will always be a place for these for extrajudicial factors to come into play. My question, however, is for what end?
For what end?
Is it for what end are we seeing these prayer rallies? For what end are we seeing all that is going on?
Now we are talking to Lone Felix, one of the Equity African fellas, and the topic of discussion today is about the Kenya that you want. But That notwithstanding, we are also looking at what has been making news in the country, and that's why we've been discussing issues to do with ICC and the state of the economy, trying to sift politics from the development agenda. You can always tell us what you think. Our SMS line is 20058. Our Twitter handle is WTVKE. Use the hashtag News Review so that you're in a position to track your conversation. Felix, let's go to the main topic of discussion, and this is the Kenya that you want. Of course, I had asked you what this means to you. Looking at what is happening in the country, are you satisfied, or do you think we will realize that dream and see the Kenya that you want?
There are few things that are happening in the country which have given us pride. And I think part of advancing this journey towards our dream country must have those two aspects, that we celebrate what is successful and what is working, but we also point out what is not working. So Kenya and Kenyans are entrepreneurial at heart. And I think the private sector in particular needs to be lauded for holding this country together, for continually creating businesses and giving us, placing our country on the global map, and really making this a very attractive place. There are also a couple of initiatives that the government has taken, both the current government, the previous governments, which have taken, and I think in my view, they really are good policies, even though there are many challenges with implementing the same, in terms of policies around youth empowerment, policies around infrastructure development, policies around promoting the country as a tourism hub and everything.
Talking of many things, if I may just jump in there, now the issue of corruption has really been taking the center stage in all these, even as the government comes up with the policies on how to, infrastructure development, matter security and all that. The place of corruption cannot be overemphasized. Don't you think corruption, with the corruption that we have in this country, this one remains to be just as good as on paper?
It's really sad. Kenya has dropped on the Transparency International rankings, for example, indicating that we are sliding further into corruption as opposed to moving towards betterment. And when this whole process of disbanding the EACC started, I wrote on my blog and said, I think the president has been misled, and probably he's been misled by people around him who are keen on crippling that commission. There are so many things that should not be happening in a proper country that we are seeing today. How do you explain the El Nino figures that were coming up?
Talking about El Nino figures, and they had said that all people should be warned. I don't know what your take on this, because we've not experienced that heavy rainfall as what was maybe projected. Do you think it was a hoax or something like that? Talking of figures,
I wouldn't want to gamble and say the meteorological department was wrong or shouldn't have done. I think they're experts, and if they felt that they need to communicate that there is a possibility of rain and excessive rain for that matter, that's good. It's good. It's good practice. I think what should worry us is, do we then want to use disasters and projections of disasters to plunder our country? That's a totally different conversation. And what is happening is really unfortunate, that we can choose to hide graft and ill intentions instead of really focusing on how are we going to approach the disaster should it happen.
So moving forward now in terms of tackling corruption and the penalties that should be there for those who are leading us astray from getting the Kenya that we want. We've seen the president suspending some cabinet secretaries, as you've said. Don't you think there should be another punishment, or rather another way of dealing with that, apart from just suspending the cabinet secretaries? Because in fact, one person said that when you suspend a cabinet secretary or a minister for that matter, what you're simply doing is offices. We're just giving this person more time to invest what he has stolen from public coffers.
There is a lot of things that need to be done around fighting corruption in this country. And just to give you my opinion is, first and foremost, when it comes to public officers, I think we need to reverse our legal regime and say all that entities charged with fighting corruption should be able to do is allege that in our estimation, you are not living within your means. You have accumulated wealth that cannot be explained, and then it should be on the honor should fall on the person who owns the wealth, or the public officer who owns the wealth, to explain himself in a court of law. How did I get this wealth? Because I think this is one of the weirdest countries in the world where every rich person has served in government. The practice is people in private business are way wealthier than people who are in public service, because public service should be about passion and sacrifice. The second thing that I think needs to happen, I was in a conference a while back in Geneva, and I happened to meet this one lady who has a lot of experience fighting corruption around the world. And while she acknowledged that there may not be a universal one-way approach to fighting corruption, she gave me a very simplified answer on how to approach it. Like, corruption needs fire from above and fire from below. Fire from above coming from political leadership. The president, his lieutenants, the opposition must commit to say, we do not want corruption. Has that happened? No.
No, not.
And then
not in
fire
Kenya.
from below, where people do not tolerate corruption. And Kenyans have done a good job in fighting corruption, but I fear that it is now becoming a new normal. And what we are seeing on social media is, when a scandal emerges, the people acknowledge that this is Kenya. So it's becoming a new normal. People create funny photos around it, and we laugh things out.
And then when something else happens, we forget about it.
We forget about it, and they create a new funny photos, and again laugh about it,
and that's it.
Goes,
Anyway, we are engaging in a discussion here concerning matters corruption, because we are talking about the Kenya that we want, and that's why Lone Felix is here to shed light on that. Now we take a short break, but don't go far, because we shall be right back after the break. Welcome back. We are glad that you're still watching WTV News Review. Always a pleasure being your host. My name is Elijah Mwangi. Today I'm joined by Lone Felix, one of the Equity Africa fellas, to discuss matters of development in this country. The first part, we've been talking about the Kenya that we want, but now let's look at young people. And of course, the young people form quite a percentage in terms of the total population in this country. The place of young people in national development. What do you have to say about that?
We are the majority, and it's not just statistics, it's a fact that young people are the majority. And so by extension, this country needs to worry us more than anyone else. And the place of a young person in the story of this country, I think, has to be created by us young people. One thing that we have to run away is a temptation to ever settle that somehow the government will create opportunities for us, or carve out a certain place and say, young people, you belong here. That tokenism has been tried, but it has not worked. So we need to first leverage on our creativity. We have to leverage on our energies. We have to leverage on our aggressiveness as people, as young people, to come out very strongly and do very little things in our very small way to try and change the narrative of our country.
You've talked about some of the opportunities that the government might present, and you've cautioned the youth against relying on that. Looking at what it has done in terms of trying to create even funds, we've seen a Youth Enterprise Development Fund at one point, Uwezo. Do you think the government is doing enough to support the young people?
Is it doing enough? I do not think so. I definitely think that there is a lot of creative things that the government should invest in to really make youth empowerment, real empowerment, and even so sustainable. And avoid tokenism and periodical empowerment that then leaves people even more dejected should it come to an end. Let me just take an example with NYS, for example, and it's an amazing project. It's given young people in this country a lot of opportunities. But again, what you see is when one cycle of clearing the trenches or collecting garbage ends, people become really, really dejected. I think where the government needs to focus, and there is policy around here, is how do we enable our young people to get into that space where they can create new businesses?
Okay, that's the government side. Yep. But you see, just like the way one of the presidents of the United States of America said, think not of what the country can do for you, but what you can do for the country. Now, moving on to the participation of the youth in development projects. What youth must do to bring change in the society. And I just want to take you back to one of the articles that you wrote. And to be very specific, it's the county that you come from, that is Busia County. Okay. And you said, today I look back and mourn at the wasted potential that the county has lost. That was Busia. Why did you say that?
Why I said that is because Western Kenya and many other parts of this country, Northeastern, Nyanza, have acknowledgedly been how do I put it, sidelined from politically, systematically, I would say. And this is even in the report by the national, the TJRC, for example. Now, what pains me so much is that eventually when devolution happens, okay, and you give these people an opportunity to empower themselves, even with the 2 or 4 or 5 billion shillings they receive,
yes,
what happens is excessive plunder and theft. Okay, so you have amazing scandals coming from Busia, amazing scandals coming from Kisumu, amazing things that governors are doing, you know, putting up, how would you call it, an Air Force One reception thing, instead of focusing on empowering their people. 10 years down the line, and this is the caution that I have to send to communities that have always told their people that we are where we are because we have been marginalized. 10 years down the line, there will be a very big question. You have been given an opportunity
to develop yourself,
with devolution. What have you done with it?
Now, as that remains a question waiting for an answer, I want to look at what you are doing in Busia. I'm meant to understand that you are trying really to come up with a lot of development projects. So in your part now, there's what the county has failed and what you'd like to see. So what are you doing?
So right now we are focusing on 3 main projects. The first one revolves around education, where we've developed a concept about an education fair, which just exposes high school students to opportunities for higher education, both within the country and outside the country. And why? Because I believe that education is very critical in trying to change the narrative. Many of us wouldn't have the opportunities we have today if we did not take time to study, take time to focus in class, and eventually get the opportunities we have. And then secondly, I'm very excited about the prospects of setting up the first innovation hub in Busia. We have gone through the motions of doing a market research. We have developed the concept and the model. We have approached a few donors who are very excited about the project. And the reason is we have the reasoning behind it is we have iHub, NILAB, Nairobi Garage, all concentrated in Nairobi. How do we create an opportunity for a young person
who is
back there at
to,
home?
to exactly, yeah. Talking of the opportunities that are there for the young people, and I want us to base this on your story, because looking at your CV as I started, I see you've been into so many places. You've served as the University International Commission of Jurists, that is ICJ Kenya, Kenya Freedom of Information Ambassador, and contributed to the key roles in the development of Freedom of Information Bill. You've been participating in policy research and advocacy initiatives. You've been to all these initiatives and all these places. These are opportunities that you've had. Which are some of these opportunities that stand to be grabbed by young people? Because I see you have a legal, or rather a law background, because you have your degree from Kenyatta University. But now for that young person who is outside there, who is not as informed as you are, what can he do?
Every young person, I can confidently say that almost 80 or 90% of young people in this country have an opportunity for information. And it starts with your phone, all right? It starts with your phone to know that I have access to a small world like internet. I can use it not just to Facebook or WhatsApp, but also to actually figure out what is going on in the country. Secondly, like I stated earlier, do not wait to be given opportunities. Sometimes you have to grab them, sometimes you have to create them yourself. The people who have inspired me most really are not university graduates or people who are doing things because they have master's degrees or what. But a young lady who stays in Gilgil and figures out, I can do something about the environment. And by the virtue of that, she then creates access to finds a way to reach out to the American embassy, to these donors, and she's such an incredible leader today. You have people who have created amazing stories when they just graduate from high school, and she's walking around and sees a lot of litter and says, I'll start having bins to make sure that nobody just drops litters everywhere, and then they build a garbage collecting company from it. So opportunities are everywhere.
Some of these initiatives that you've been, I believe there are so many senior people there, considering that even at one point you are with Kenya Daima, which is an initiative by Kenya Private Sector Alliance. So how do you exactly form a working relationship? You do your own thing and still you have very good relationship with your seniors.
I learn a lot anytime I interact with people who have been with the system, people who have created a business and have gone through the experience. You learn a lot by just being with them and learning from them. So I think it's very important that even as we try to forge and create newness and espouse new businesses and new ideas, we have to create that association with the generation that is ahead of us, because there is no vacuum. Kenya is a full country. There is someone a step away from you. I have, for example, while I've had my own reservations against government, I've always tried to find a way of pushing a certain amendment to the law through people who are in government, because as a person I don't have that ability to go to parliament to make sure that the change happens.
Now, as we wind up this conversation, we must talk about something connected with exactly what you are saying, and this is the future leadership of this country. You've been to conferences on concerning matters, governance and all that. Now we are just gearing up for the general election come 2017. If we are to exactly see the Kenya that we want, to realize Vision 2030, and considering the place of young people in the society and the critical role that they play, the future leadership of this country, what does it take for us to have the best out of it?
I was reading an article recently by Ted Malanda. It was a very satirical article saying out of a country of 40 million people we had, our best leaders are Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, for example. It was a very satirical article, but it had a lot of truism in it. What would it take? I think the first thing is a conscious people. And with that, I am not worried, because I think Kenyans are becoming conscious every day. And while that has not translated into electing the most prudent of leaders, I think it is a step that we are moving towards there. And then the second thing that it is going to will lead us towards proper leadership is that we need to make politics less lucrative and more accountable. In 2017, let's try more young people. Young people should offer themselves for elective posts, but also the electorate should be urged to elect new minds. And why I'm saying this is because I have had an incredible working relationship with Johnson Sakaja. I've had an incredible working relationship with Ken Okoth, for example. These are young people
and you see
who really do not care about which party they come from,
tribe,
but which solution am I offering?
Yes. Well, we've been talking to Lon Felix, and he has quite some initiatives that he has been conducting, being involved in policy research and all that. And I'm so sure once we invite you another day, you'll come here, because the conversation of the Kenya that we want is something that we can discuss, we go on and on and on. But I believe that also people can find you online.
Yes, I have my online platforms. Anyone who would like to access me, I have my blog, lonfelix.blog. Sorry, lonfelix.com/blog, Facebook, Twitter. We can always interact and further the conversation. Go ahead.
Wow, amazing. So at this point, we call it a wrap, but you can always send us feedback. Tell us what you think concerning today's show and also WTV programming. And our SMS line is 20058, Twitter at WTVK using the hashtag News Review, and on Facebook is WTV Kenya. See you again next week.